Welcome to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and joining me today is Sam. We're diving into one of the most consequential regulatory moments for enterprise AI, the EU AI Act's August 2026 implementation deadline. Sam, this isn't some distant future date anymore. We're talking about less than 2 years away. Why should organizations care about this right now?
Great question, Alex. Most enterprises are treating August 2026 like it's years away. But here's the reality. McKinsey's latest research shows that 73% of organizations running AI systems have virtually no governance framework in place, yet only 31% have actually budgeted for compliance preparation. That's a massive gap between awareness and action, and it's creating serious risk.
That's a striking statistic. So we're looking at companies that know regulations are coming but haven't prepared financially or structurally. What does that mean practically? If an organization ignores this deadline, what happens on August 3rd?
They can't legally deploy high-risk AI systems. And in sectors like finance, healthcare, employment, and critical infrastructure, most AI systems are classified as high risk. So, on August 3rd, organizations without proper compliance documentation, risk assessments, and oversight mechanisms either pull their systems offline or face regulatory enforcement. The cost of retrofitting compliance after the fact is exponentially higher than building it in from day one.
Let's break down what high risk actually means under the EU AI Act. Sam, can you walk us through the risk classification requirements that come into play in August 2026?
Absolutely. The Act creates 3 tiers: prohibited, high risk, and limited risk. Prohibited systems are already illegal, like social credit systems or real-time facial recognition in public spaces. But come August 2026, high-risk systems need formal compliance documentation before deployment. We're talking about any AI system that affects fundamental rights, data protection, or discrimination outcomes.
So if I'm a financial services company using AI for credit decisions, that's automatically high risk?
Exactly. Lending algorithms, credit scoring, investment recommendations, all high risk by default under the Act. Deloitte's survey found that 68% of financial services firms recognize August 2026 as a critical inflection point, but only 44% have actually started building the technical infrastructure to comply. That's terrifying when you think about it.
That's a 24-point gap between acknowledgement and action. What technical infrastructure are we talking about here?
Organizations need to establish what's called a governance framework, essentially an architecture that bakes compliance into AI systems from inception rather than bolting it on later. This includes risk classification protocols, technical documentation standards, training data logging, system behavior monitoring, human oversight mechanisms, and algorithmic impact assessments. You're also going to need third-party conformity assessment bodies verifying everything.
That sounds like a massive operational shift. Now, one thing that caught my attention in your background material is the complexity around agentic AI, autonomous agents. Why is that a particular governance headache?
That's the crucial piece that most compliance frameworks haven't caught up to yet. Traditional AI governance was built around predictive models. You input data, get an output. Human reviews it. Agentic AI is fundamentally different. These autonomous agents perceive their environment, make decisions, and execute actions with minimal human intervention. They operate continuously, adapt in real time, and their decision patterns might not be fully transparent even to their creators.
So you're saying the EU AI Act was written with one eye on traditional AI, but now we're deploying systems that the regulations weren't designed to govern?
Precisely. A lending algorithm that produces a score? You can audit that. A supply chain autonomous agent that's rerouting shipments, renegotiating contracts, and adjusting pricing in real time based on market conditions? That's exponentially harder to govern. You need continuous monitoring, drift detection, and human override capabilities that traditional compliance frameworks don't address.
This is where I think the real opportunity lies, though. You mentioned earlier that organizations implementing governance frameworks today gain competitive advantages. How does that work?
Organizations that integrate compliance requirements into their AI architecture from the start build cleaner, more transparent systems. They develop better documentation practices, stronger monitoring capabilities, and clearer human oversight mechanisms. That's not just compliance, that's operational efficiency. When August 2026 arrives, they're deploying confidently while competitors are in crisis mode retrofitting systems.
Let's get practical. If I'm sitting in an enterprise right now, let's say I'm in healthcare, deploying diagnostic AI systems, what should I be doing in the next 6 months to prepare?
First, conduct a comprehensive AI readiness assessment. Map all your AI systems, classify them by risk level, and honestly evaluate your current governance maturity. Second, establish a governance framework that's specific to your sector. Healthcare has different requirements than finance. Third, begin implementing documentation practices for training data, system behavior, and human oversight mechanisms. And critically, start conversations with third-party conformity assessment bodies now. They're going to be bottlenecks by 2026.
You mentioned sector-specific variations. Are the requirements fundamentally different across industries? Or is it more about which systems get classified as high risk?
Both. The core requirements, risk assessment, documentation, human oversight, apply universally. But healthcare systems face different compliance pressures than employment platforms, which face different pressures than finance. In employment, AI used for recruiting, performance evaluation, or termination decisions gets intense scrutiny because it directly affects people's livelihoods. Healthcare diagnostic AI is high risk because misclassification causes harm. The governance architecture adapts to sector-specific risks.
So there's no one-size-fits-all compliance strategy. Organizations need to understand their specific regulatory landscape. What about organizations operating across multiple EU jurisdictions, or even outside the EU but serving EU customers?
The EU AI Act has extraterritorial reach. If you're deploying AI systems that affect EU residents and that covers a lot of companies, you're subject to August 2026 compliance requirements. So a US fintech serving European customers needs to comply. A global e-commerce platform using AI for recommendations to EU users needs to comply. That's why this deadline matters so universally.
That's a critical point. This isn't just European organizations, it's anyone touching the EU market. Sam, if you were advising a C-suite executive today, what would be your #1 recommendation?
Start immediately with a governance assessment. Don't wait for external pressure or regulatory inquiries. Organizations that proactively establish compliance frameworks today position themselves as leaders in responsible AI deployment. And frankly, the organizations doing this right now are gaining operational insights about their AI systems that their competitors don't have. That's competitive advantage.
It's really about moving from reactive compliance to proactive governance. That's a mindset shift. Before we wrap, I want to touch on something our listeners might be thinking. Isn't compliance expensive? Doesn't retrofitting systems cost money either way?
It costs money either way, but the calculus is completely different. Building compliance into AI architecture from inception adds maybe 15 to 20% to initial development costs. Retrofitting after August 2026 can add 200–300% because you're re-engineering systems under pressure, facing regulatory penalties, and managing operational disruption. The math is obvious when you do the calculation.
So it's really an investment in avoiding catastrophic costs down the line. Sam, what should listeners take away from this conversation?
3 things. First, August 2026 is not a distant deadline. It's 18 months away and most enterprises aren't ready. Second, compliance isn't just about avoiding penalties. It's about building better, more transparent, more governable AI systems. Third, organizations starting today gain operational advantages that procrastinators won't have. The time to act is literally now.
Excellent framing. Listeners, this has been a critical conversation about one of the most important regulatory moments for enterprise AI. For much deeper context, data analysis, and implementation frameworks, head over to EtherLink AI and check out our full article on AI governance and EU AI Act compliance. The detailed guidance there will give you the specific roadmap your organization needs. Thanks for joining us on EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and thanks to Sam for the sharp analysis today.
Thanks for having me. And to anyone listening, don't let August 2026 sneak up on you. Start the conversation with your organization this week.